my name is Sam, and thanks for checking out this video. Make sure to hit the subscribe button down below, hit the bell notification, and if you get to the end and enjoyed, feel free to give the video a thumbs up. So as always, I like to end the year with sort of like a pat on the back of like, rather than being like, oh man, I didn't hit my reading goal, or oh, I didn't read these books by this author, or read enough diverse books, or read enough authors that were of, I don't know, Klingon descent. I don't know. I just, I like to think of the things that I did do, especially with how like depressing 2018 was. Just think about the things that I did well, or things that I achieved that at the beginning of the year maybe seemed like behemoth tasks. And then I want to set some goals for 2019. So I mean, I did a video on what my 2018 goals were, and I looked back at it, and I think I did a few too many just general like tasks that were not like easily achievable, for lack of a better term, or something like I wanted to read a book by an Indigenous author every single month, and I love the concept of that, but then I like got halfway through the year and was like, there is not an awful lot of Indigenous YA books, and to be even on top of that, I really dislike contemporary books for the most part, and the ones coming out, like things like Hearts Unbroken, I really want to read that. Cynthia Leach Smith is an Indigenous author, but the actual premise of it sounded a little bit like The Hate U Give, which I think those sorts of books are quite important to read, but I just hate contemporaries, and I have to be in such a specific mood to make myself read a book that I know is like about racism or is going to make me angry. And then I did read things like Trail of Light by Rebecca Roanhorse, and she's a new author for me, and she has a bunch of books coming out in the next couple of years. So there is the sequel to The Trail of Lightning coming out in 2019, and then Rick Riordan's imprint is having her release a middle grade book with Indigenous folklore, and I'm very happy with coming to the end of the year and just saying, I found this new author, I read her book, I really enjoyed it, I'm going to keep an eye on her. And she has another book that I think or another series that's started off, or it's not supposed to start until 2020. I think it's on Goodreads somewhere though. But I'm just really, really, really excited that I found that author. And I did read a couple smaller books. That's kind of where I went default when I was like, there's really no YA books that I really wanted to read. There's David Alexander Robertson, his book Strangers, I think, that I just never got to this year. I also don't own it, so it's kind of hard. And I kind of kept defaulting to going to read children's books, which I think are fine, but I have a hard time motivating myself to read children's books. So I didn't complete that task, but I found an author that I like, and I think that task would maybe be easier in like 5 years' time, maybe, when hopefully we'll have more Indigenous authors. Because I mean, really, for years, all that people were like, oh, Sherman Alexie, Diary of a Part-Time Indian. I've read that book, and Sherman Alexie is actually apparently a garbage human being, so I don't want to read his stuff anymore. So I'm kind of just in this weird place where there's nothing kind of new that is kind of YA fantasy that piques my interest, unfortunately. So I'm just going to keep an eye on Rebecca Roanhorse and go from there. I also failed miserably, miserably at getting through my Shakespeare plays, but I did reread Much Ado About Nothing and rewatched the film, which I hadn't watched in so many years. And honestly, I did it all in one day. That was probably one of the nicest days that I had in 2018 of watching Keanu Reeves like 30 years ago, and like and seeing like the random Harry Potter cast in there. It was just wonderful. So didn't get that done, but the book I did get done, loved it. So hopefully I can keep eventually working on those. I only own 3 other plays, so maybe I'll just throw them in when I feel like it. I also didn't get to read all of the new Outlander series. I felt like it was reaching on my goal for that one, but I did get through over the first half of the series. I have A Breath of Snow and Ashes to start in January, and I'm A-okay with that. I want to keep paying attention to the TV series because I feel like that fell off my radar because I kept focusing on the books. So that's something I'm going to focus on. But I finished, like, they're all massive books. They're like 800 plus pages. And I finished the first 5, I think. So my goal for 2019 will be to finish that series. And kind of along that same wavelength, I kind of bailed on the classics pretty early on. Peter Pan just kind of rubs me the wrong way, and it is because of it's Peter Pan specifically. So, you know, I think I'm not going to worry about that for 2019, but I'll just keep an eye on that bookshelf, and if I feel like randomly picking up The Adventures of Robin Hood, then I will randomly pick up The Adventures of Robin Hood. I also didn't get all of the Sherlock Holmes series done. I think that's something I could have done, but I just legitimately forgot about it for several months at a time. They're also actually really good stories to when I'm just like, I have things that I'm doing around the house. I want to listen to an audiobook, and because of how old they are, the audiobooks are all on YouTube. So I'll just listen to the audiobook of, you know, I don't know, The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes while I'm doing dishes or laundry or whatever like that. So I think I'm just going to keep kind of sideline working on that one. So numbers-wise, I'm also really impressed with myself. I'm on track. There's still a couple days till the end of the year when I'm filming this, but I am on track to finish about 240 books. Now that is technically a little bit lower than last year. However, last year I included books that I DNF'd, but if I read over 50 pages of them. This year I decided not to do that. I figured out a way. I marked it as read and then removed the dates on Goodreads of when I read them, so it just goes to read, but it doesn't know what year to catalog it in. So I think I actually technically read more this year than I did last year. Successes, I reread the entire Harry Potter series. I'm so excited about that, and I don't know, I just like, it would refresh my absolute love of Harry Potter. And it just made me I looked at it a little bit differently than I had, you know, I don't know, when was the last time I read them? Probably like 5 years ago. And then before then it was like I just read them as they kind of came out as a kid. So I think now like that there's all this returning hype because of Fantastic Beasts, and there's a lot of drama around the Fantastic Beasts movie, especially The Crimes of Grindelwald. So I feel like it was kind of nice for me to just like detach from that and go back to like naive Sam and reading Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone that like J.K. Rowling wrote while she was living off social assistances in a coffee shop on napkins. Like I think it was just like a nice break. I also reread The Lunar Chronicles by Marissa Meyer. I also did a reread of the ACOTAR, the first 3 books, and then read the 4th, whatever we want to call it, Court of Frost and Starlight, when it came out. On top of that, I reread all of the Throne of Glass series and read Kingdom of Ash. And I read Catwoman Soul Stealer, sorry. So I'm completely caught up on Sarah J. Maas. I also reread and caught up on the Illuminae series by Amy Kaufman and Jay Kristoff. I finally read the Shades of Magic series by V.E. Schwab, which I feel like I've just been looking, and I don't know if it's because the book got bigger, like drastically bigger as the series went on or whatever, but I found looking at that trilogy just being like, oh god, that's going to be exhausting to read. But I did it. I reread Shades of Magic, and then I read the 2nd and 3rd book. I did a reread of the Remnant Chronicles as well. It was pretty easy because I knew I loved those books so much. They were actually still pretty fresh in my mind, and they're one of my favorite series of last year. But I reread them because Mary Pearson, the author, had Dance of Thieves come out this year, and then A Vow of Thieves, the sequel, is coming out in 2019. I'm probably going to reread Dance of Thieves in early 2019, and then be ready for Vow of Thieves to come out. I'm also completely caught up on Sebastian de Castell. That's this dude here. I read all 4 of the books in the Greatcoat series, and then I've read all 4 of the books in the Spellslinger series that are out. Book 5 and 6 are supposed to come out in 2019. I actually recently scanned all of my books into an app, so I hopefully won't buy any duplicates. And I was actually surprised the app has statistics on it, and I have read over 50% of my actual book collection. I'm also really proud of myself that I found contemporaries, multiple, this year that I read and actually really, really enjoyed. And I think I had made the mistake subconsciously, the way that people do about really any genre, of like, oh, I hate sci-fi because I read this one book. And you're like, sci-fi has subgenres. All genres have subgenres. There's just all these different catalogs, which I know that. I'm a librarian. I know that when it comes to fantasy and sci-fi and horror and thrillers and mysteries and historical fiction. But my brain, for some reason, was just like, ugh, contemporaries. So I think I've kind of broken my brain a little bit on that one, which is great. And last thing I really want to highlight was I found a book to movie adaptation this year that I not only liked, but loved. We've got Crazy Rich Asians, which is like this diamond in the rough. I'm so happy about how well that movie did, but also like the quality of it, the casting of it, and how they did really look at the book and try and adapt as much as possible to it. And the things that didn't make it were still like almost like paid respect to, if you understand what I mean. So I'm really excited they're doing a book 2 and 3 into a movie. So for 2019 goals, I looked back at the things I wasn't able to accomplish in 2018 and be like, why wasn't I able to do this? And I feel like giving myself more things that are specific, like make sure to reread this series. I'm also participating in a couple challenges this year. So overall, I want to do the Goodreads challenge, just a number 1. I would like to set it at 200. The TBR and Beyond group also has a yearly challenge. There's only like 24, I think, challenges on there, and I can definitely do them. I helped put it together, so I can definitely do it. And then I think I'm still debating, kind of humming and hawing. I think I'll look at it once, like, I don't know, maybe once I get back to work and see how similar it is to, or how many categories maybe are doable for me and not going to be a task, or that will fit into my like already things that I want to read sort of thing. So I'm also debating doing the Mrs. Darcy's TBR or yearly challenge. It's also not a super big one, so I think that's very doable. So first of all, I went through my books. There's not too many. I think there's only 14 in here right now. But I went through all the books that I was like, if you haven't picked this up in a year, then it's gone. Okay, girl, that's it. And I put them in here, and once a month, the beginning of the month, probably in my TBR videos, I'm going to pull 2 of them out of here, and I have to read at least 1 of them. If I can read both of them, that's great. But I think having 2 will at least give me the opportunity to like pick based on kind of my mood. Another thing I really want to do is make sure that I use the always fully booked book planner from Little Inkling Designs. Fair warning, whenever I mention this or post a picture of this, people ask me where it's from. It's from Little Inkling Design, but I do believe it's completely sold out. I pre-ordered this a couple months ago, and I think she only had like a couple spares and they were gone pretty quickly. Whereas this one has a lot more extra features, like at the end of each day it says like, you know, pages read. That's something that I think would be really helpful when I get to the end of the year to see that. Because Goodreads isn't the easiest way to do that, I think. A lot of the times I have issues with they have my ISBN, but the book that I have with that ISBN is like 50 has 50 pages more or less than what they have. So it's not the most reliable. And sometimes, because of how the Goodreads app works, I use Goodreads predominantly on my phone. It will just set to whatever the default is, and a lot of the times it's the Kindle or the ebook. And I'm like, no, I read the hardcover. One thing that I'm really hoping I can get to is to read at least 1 nonfiction book a month. Now, this isn't really going to be a task for me. I think it's just making it a challenge will make me actually be able to do it, because there are a lot of actually interesting nonfictions out there. Now, right off the bat, if you have some, absolutely put it in the description box down below, but please do not give me celebrity memoirs. I find those immensely boring a lot of the times. There's a few books like Lauren Graham's. I've read the Lauren Graham one, Talking as Fast as I Can, because it's Lorelai Gilmore, and I've read Yes Please. But I don't find, like, a lot of comedians' bios and all that stuff, they don't hit it for me. In 2018, I believe, I read books like Radium Girls or The Woman Who Smashed Codes. And I don't know, it's not necessarily always like feminist history, but I find these very weird, obscure aspects or events in history that I never learnt about in the, I don't know, 12 years of up to high school and then the 4 years of history degree that I did. I never learnt of any of this stuff like the Radium Girls. So I think I'm going to really take an active look at finding maybe things like, Elizabeth Wine's got me thinking a lot recently about female war stories, or female criminals are something that I find really interesting. I saw a book title recently that it was about like the woman that inspired Chicago, like the Broadway play or whatever. And I was like, that'd be a pretty interesting thing to hear about. I'd also really be interested to maybe read a couple of the books out there that are like North Korean escape stories, because I find that's really interesting, especially with the current political climate. So if you have any good nonfiction suggestions that are not celebrity memoirs or celebrity biographies or whatever, please leave them in the comments down below. I'd love to see that. I also really want to include in there, I really want to read the Golden State Killer book by Michelle McNamara, partially because I'm in love with Patton Oswalt, but I just, like, she did put so much energy into that book before she passed away. And and especially with him being caught now, I'm just so curious about everything that is around that. Because I had never heard of this until he was arrested. So, like, yeah. I'm really hoping to read Les Mis by Victor Hugo this year. I'm hoping I don't chicken out because of the size of it, but I think it'll be a good one to start off reading earlier on at the beginning of this year, because Sky Without Stars is coming out and it's supposed to be a Les Mis, and I kind of hate when I go into a book that's supposed to be inspired by or a retelling of, and then I'm like, I've never read that. It's one thing if I'm like, oh, I've never heard of that. That's interesting. I'll have to go look it up. But it's like something like Les Mis. I didn't read it in high school when I was supposed to, and then just never got to it since. I also want to keep working on the Outlander series and the Sherlock Holmes book anthology, whatever the heck we're calling it. There's quite a few series that I want to do rereads of, including Jacoby, The Girl from Everywhere, The Queen of the Tearling. Now, The Queen of the Tearling, I've read the first 2 books and haven't read the third, but it's been so long since I read the first 2 books, and I think I kept putting the third one off because everyone told me that the third one's not good. But I feel like a lot of people told me that about the first 2 books too, and then I read them and enjoyed them. So I'm going to give it a go. I'm going to attempt it. And if I don't like them, then I can just unhaul the books. I also want to catch up on the Queen's Thief series by Megan Turner Waller, I believe it is. I own the 4 books, and I've read the first one and enjoyed the first one and just hadn't got back to it, so I want to focus on that. I also want to do a reread of Truth Witch, Wind Witch, Sight Witch, and then be ready for Blood Witch. I don't love the cover of Blood Witch, so I'm trying to reread these books because I really remember enjoying the first 2 books and then was meh about Sight Witch. So I'm hoping that if I reread it and it'll refresh my memory, I can take like a definitive stance of like, yes, I want to continue this series, or no, I don't want to because whatever, or I'll continue it, but I'm just going to borrow it from the library sort of situation. I also want to really get to the Precious Stones trilogy. That's like Ruby Red, Emerald Green, and Sapphire Blue or something like that. There's time travel. I think the covers are what's throwing me because that does not look like time travel. That looks like a debutante Gossip Girl drama. I also want to catch up on my backlog of Niall Schusterman books. I'm waiting for The Toll to come out. I don't know when it's supposed to come out in 2019. I just know it's supposed to. And I have Dry now by him and his brother to read, but I also have the Unwind Quartet and I just haven't gotten to them. I would also really like to finish my kind of catch up on Rick Riordan. I have the rest of the Heroes of the Olympus series to read. I think books 3, 4, and 5. I have the first 2 of the Apollo books, and I have the first 2 of the Magnus Chase books. And I just kept buying them, and I was like, wait, you haven't even read Percy Jackson. What are you doing, woman? I also really want to reread the Graceling series. I'm fairly certain this is a weird one. I read them before I was using Goodreads, and that was several years ago. I think whilst I was in like grad school. And I remember vividly picking up Graceling. I don't remember if I finished it. I don't remember if I read the sequels. I feel like I did. I'm not totally sure. And I think the last thing that I have for myself to read, I really want to get to the Arabian Nights this year. Like the original by Richard Burton. Yeah, the original. I have this beautiful Barnes & Noble bound up edition, and Aladdin is coming out. Huzzah! In May 2019, really, please don't suck. I'm very Team Jafar after seeing the trailer. Whew, Team Jafar. I'm, oh boy. Just Google Jafar Aladdin 2019. Oh, Jafar. I'm so excited for that movie, but I've never actually read the original, like, the Arabian Nights. And I also think it's interesting because I've read quite a few books that were inspired by or loose retellings of. And also, don't feel bad, don't feel guilty, don't be scared to, like, brag about a success that you did in 2018. You don't have to be all like, oh, I read less books than this year and that sucks. You did something good. I promise you that you did. Make sure to check the description box down below. I will link all of my social media. If you follow me, I will follow you back. Have a safe and happy New Year.